Well, good evening, everybody, and welcome to this special In Conversation event with none other than the Queen of Shops, the legend that is Mary Portas. My name is Amy Irons, and I'm delighted to welcome you here this evening. For those of you who don't know me, I'm a TV and radio presenter here in Scotland, working at the BBC. I work across a range of news, sport, entertainment, so that tends to mean jack of all trades, master of absolutely nothing. So stealing a living probably at this point, but it's my pleasure to welcome you here to the Everyman Cinema, the perfect setting for a discussion that we're going to have this evening. I must say I was here about a week ago to see Wuthering Heights, and pretty much everybody in the cinema was greeting, crying their eyes out by the end. So hopefully we will not have that by the end of the evening, but yes, we are in for an absolute treat and a perfect setting to have it, as I say, here at the fabulous Everyman Cinema in Glasgow. And I'm especially thrilled because this is my first ever event for ICAS, and what a brilliant way to start their annual International Women's Day celebration, honouring women in business. ICAS, they have a long history, as I'm sure many of you know, when it comes to championing excellence and ethical leadership. And it feels great to be part of a conversation that is really putting women in leadership at the centre. So for those of you who don't know, ICAS is the global professional membership organisation and business network for chartered accountants, or CAs as they're known. But it is so much more than that I've learned through discussions already. It's an educator, a regulator, an examiner, a professional awarding body, and importantly, it nurtures the next generation of talent and finance professionals and business leaders. At its core, a long-standing commitment to ethics and integrity. And tonight, I must say, I am very proud to be introducing three remarkable women. Firstly, Gail Bogue, the first female chief executive in ICAS's 172-year history, which just, I mean, it feels crazy that we're talking about that length of time, but Gail previously served as ICAS Executive Director of Learning and Market Development, overseeing a major transformation of the Chartered Accountant syllabus, and was previously Dean of Edinburgh Napier's Business School and Regional Director for Scotland at BT. So a career combining academic insight with real-world business experience. So great to see her at the helm of such an honourable institution. Next up we have Karen Scholes, CA, this year's ICAS President, and Karen is the sixth woman ever to hold the ICAS presidency. She previously served as Vice President and Deputy President and leads Scholes Chartered Accountants, and that's a firm recognised for its work supporting entrepreneurs, sustainability and future talent. A fantastic advocate for those in leadership that values courage, empathy and purpose. And of course, the star of tonight's event, the woman that has brought many of you here this evening, Mary Portas OBE. She needs little introduction, but of course we're still going to give her it. So just a little snapshot for you. I mean, she's a household name when we're talking about retail and culture. Best known as probably the Queen of Shops. She's the visionary who turned Harvey Nichols from a struggling department store into a cultural icon. She runs Portas, a business transformation company, and is the author of 6 books, including the latest, the brilliantly titled, I must say, I Shop, Therefore I Am. She is a fearless champion of creativity in business and showing that bold ideas can really lead to real change, whether we're talking about the high street or just wider society in general. So yes, we're very privileged to have Mary joining us tonight to share her insight and her experience, plenty of stories along the way. So before we dive into that, a few housekeeping rules as you would expect and notes for you. So I'm sure many of you know that we're supporting SmartWorks tonight, and it's an amazing UK charity. Mary's a patron of that as well, helping women who are facing barriers to employment. So it could be women returning to work after a break, facing long-term unemployment, or simply just lacking the right guidance when it comes to coaching or professional clothing. So SmartWorks provides tailored coaching, outfits, ongoing support to help women rebuild their confidence and then succeed in job interviews. And tens of thousands of women have already benefited already, many of them securing employment in weeks, which is just fantastic to hear about. So you will be able to donate at any time via a QR code on screen, which will hopefully pop up at some point. If it doesn't, we'll make sure that you find out exactly how to donate, because obviously every contribution really does help us. There will be questions as well at the end, so don't be shy. is my message, because Mary is here to answer those questions, and our online audience as well. We want you to feel part of the conversation too. So you can post your question to Mary in the Q&A box on the right-hand side of your screen. So do send them in. We want to try and get as many voices and hear from as many of you as we possibly can. There also is the opportunity to buy Mary's new book. She'll be signing copies as well, so you can, yes, grab a copy of that. It's a must-read for anyone interested in business, fashion, creativity and leadership, so grab a copy if you haven't already. Final word before I introduce Gail. There are no planned fire drills, so if one does go off, we're hoping that it doesn't, but if it does go off, just calmly follow the exit sign up there and wait for a member of staff, and they will show you exactly where to go next. So that's all from me at the moment. It is time now to pass over to the fantastic Gail Bogue to kick off this event.
Thank you very much, Amy. And welcome everybody, and thank you for joining us here in Glasgow tonight and online. Delighted to have you with us. And like you, I am very much looking forward to hearing from Mary and learning more about her successful, influential and hugely inspirational career. In her latest book, as Amy said, I Shop, Therefore I Am, she talks about the important role that creativity can play in our ever-changing world, with many challenges to overcome. And whilst it's certainly true that wearing fabulous clothes makes everything feel better, Mary isn't just talking about creativity in fashion. Her call is for business leaders to be bold, to embrace innovation, and in doing so, lead cultural, societal, and commercial change. And you can no doubt tell from the fact that we've invited Mary here this evening, that's not a sentiment that we at ICAS disagree with. You see, we just don't teach chartered accountant students the technical details of accounting, finance, and business. The value of the CA qualification isn't just working towards the ability to do some high-level number crunching and financial analysis. The truth is, we help our students develop a very specific mindset. It's the mindset of a business and financial strategist who's not afraid to innovate. It's the mindset of somebody who challenges productivity and puts their professional skepticism to good use. Because the CA is somebody who shines the light of their vision and solutions where others may not think to look. And with that mindset, even when the CA isn't maybe the person with the big creative ideas, they're very often the critical business partner that enables those big ideas to become a reality. And it's a large part of why, at 172 years old, as Amy has said, ICAS is the world's oldest accounting professional body. Another theme from Mary's book, which I'm looking forward to hearing more about, which connects directly with the ICAS ethos and the CA mindset, is, of course, her belief in purpose-led business. At ICAS, we're also great believers in the idea that business can be a power for good and a vehicle for profit. And those two aren't mutually exclusive. In fact, doing the right thing, promoting the public interest, is central to everything we do at ICAS. It's also a large part, of course, of what attracts young people to the accountancy profession today. And whether it's ethical business, sustainable business, or business that gives back to society and local communities, our CA students come to ICAS for a career that is truly worthwhile in every sense of the word. And I don't need to tell the people here in the room and online how important that is. They want to be part of the global network of ICAS CAs, many again of whom are here with us this evening, but all of whom are doing great things, making a difference, leading by example and from the front and all around the world. But let's be honest, you're not here to listen to me. So I am going to pause it there. Obviously, we'd love to talk to everybody later on tonight, but I am going to stop and get on to the main event of the evening and back to Amy and Mary. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Gail. And as Gail said, it is time to hear from this incredible woman who's joined us. Let's hear it for Mary Portas, everyone. Just making sure I've got the Q&A up, and I'm sure you all have your...
Is my mic working? You can hear me.
Yes, can everyone up the back?
I like the casual way he just walks over and goes, have you turned it on? No stress.
No, it's the Glasgow way. It's the Glasgow way, Mary. It is brilliant to have you here in Scotland. That's actually what I was thinking when I was reading more and doing my research before this event. You'd said that you're 40% Scottish. I know your dad was Irish, so there's a lot of Celtic blood. I'm just wondering, are the Celtic connections or any of the traits from when you were growing up with the Irish influence or the Scottish influence that you think?
I think it's quite a similar energy. I rang my sister when I arrived and went, oh my God, I've left London. It was 15 degrees. Sorry, Moan, saying that. Really sorry. And she went, oh, stop it. We've got it in our blood. You can deal with that weather. And it's so true. I think there's a great humour. I always, whenever I did more events on my literary festival in Scotland than I did. I haven't been to Ireland for it yet. And I just think there's a canniness, there's an energy, there's a humour. And we say we. I don't know anyone else who says we. Do you like a wee cup of tea? I still say that. Anyway, just love it. There's something really quite cute about that. But I feel there's the Celt mix in there, and I definitely can feel that difference between the people when you work with a lot of English people. There is that difference. And I think it centres around humour, if I'm honest.
Yes, good sense of humour, we like to think, don't we? We have your book here, the latest book number 6, am I right in saying? So what was it, Mary, that made you want to put pen to paper again? And what was the big ambition, I suppose, with this book that you wanted to take us behind the shop window and that you really wanted people to take away from this?
I don't know if any of my books, they just suddenly get this sort of feeling. I think one of the things that I've enjoyed in my career, and we were talking about creativity, and I don't believe it just sits with the big hipster with the beard in the art department. It's much more an integrated rhythm that happens in business and always. I mean, I wouldn't get anywhere without the people who understand the numbers, for sure. But that just came, there's times in your life where things feel right, culturally feel right. And I went to see this exhibition that was in Kensington at the Design Museum, and it was called Rebel, and it was 30 years. God, someone's put the aircon on. It's bloody freezing up here. Can someone turn it down? Can the dude who strolled over turn down the aircon?
That was you mentioning.
And anyway,
that was you mentioning the weather in London. Somebody just thought.
Someone thought, sod that. Let's give her a blow of good Glaswegian air. Anyway, I went to this exhibition. It was 30 years of Rebel, new generation designs, all about young designers, and I launched that at Harvey Nicks. It was an idea I had when I was 30. And I went and I got in touch with my old crew. I hadn't seen them in years. And we went, and you know, there's a time where you go, did we do that? Were we allowed to do that? And we just talked about it and laughed. And I rang my agent the next day and I said, I'd like to write the book about Harvey Nicks without being sued. Is that possible? And they went, okay, Mary, let's work this out, because there's been this real connection back to the 90s. Yeah. And so they were very excited about that. And the more I've looked at that, and as I was writing it, I realised that it was a time that was the very last time that was pre-digital, that changed fundamentally how we live. Not just how we buy, how we live. And I think the generations that remember it, like myself, and were part of it, and every generation, whether it's a Gen Z or a Gen X. I'm so going to move away from this Force 10 Gale, but I don't mind. It will still be. Will I be in camera though, or will you not be able to see me?
So.
You're all right, Evelyn. Is that it was a time where it felt, especially in the world when it's such a shaky time, that connection was really deeply important, and that so much activity that happened was through, whether that was the music scene, whether that was through retail, whether that there was a physicality about that era. And it's really interesting to see, I think, how that's affecting a return to parts of that, us realising what we lost when we so became obsessed with this, and how much we lost in life.
Yeah, you've, as you say, there's this re-emergence of the 90s, whether it's our fashion, music. We're seeing a lot of that now, aren't we? And you obviously go back to the 90s in your book. Can you imagine doing the job that you did at Harvey Nicks and the big, bold decisions that you made back then? Can you imagine doing that in 2026?
Yes, it's needed. And I think we became obsessed in a time of consumerism with operationally how fast, how quick and how cheap can we get stuff to people. And I think we lost a really important part of business on every level. Interestingly, I went and met the CEO, the new CEO, a fabulous woman who was ex-CEO of McQueen, and she wanted to show me around what they're doing at Harvey Nichols. And she said it's just so much more difficult today. And it is, because you've got to create destinations. And that means more than just, this is a beautiful store and I've got some lovely things in it. What makes people want to come there? And always what I tried to do was create some sort of atmosphere through whatever that is. And you'd have to read the book. I mean, I'd have to take you through all of I always treated it like a theatrical event. Not a film event, a theatrical event. And when you're in creating theatrical events, you have to have that audience with you. They're part of it. Because when you're in a film, it's much more passive, despite you going to Wuthering Heights, which I thought was terrible, but nevertheless. It's just terrible. But no, that's the age difference, isn't it?
We can agree to disagree on that one, Mary. But I mean, your book it's packed with anecdotes, with stories from the journey that you took Harvey Nicks on. What was it like taking those big decisions when it came to visual merchandising and what you were trying to achieve with the business? Did it feel like you were coming up against a lot of roadblocks and people saying no? What was the response like when you went into Harvey Nicks and you were trying to?
Well, it was very different. I mean, I was 28. I didn't want to go, and I was the display manager at Topshop, and I was the age group of the people who shopped Topshop. And I was having a great time, and I got moved across by the chairman, and because this was at a time in the 80s that was happening, late 80s, where experience was coming into retail. And we'd moved through this time and it was all happening in the States, and the chairman used to send me over to New York to see what was happening. And I remember I was the display manager. I was this, naff little thing working at Topshop, dressing windows with a team of 5, just coming up with crazy ideas. And he loved it and he recognised this. I mean, one happened to be when I was at a nightclub and Boy George was there and said, "I love your windows. Can I come and play in them?" Okay. And I booked him to come in and do it. And he took so long in makeup with his friend Marilyn that the shop was nearly closed by the time I got him in the windows. But we sort of did things so instinctively that were connected to the rhythm of what was happening culturally. Even my body moves when I do that. And when you take yourself outside of that, even this, and for the people that watching us at home, it will be a different sort of rhythm that you're in when you're physically in a space. So he moved me across and I turned up to this luxury store looking like Cyndi Lauper, and everybody was dressed like Princess Di. And it was the time of the Sloane Rangers. So, they really did have pearls and ruffled shirts on, and it was just before it tipped into the 90s when brands became super brands. It's a very different time. And luxury really was the people who had money. These women, wherever you put a store, and it's the same today, really. If you open up a cafe or a restaurant or a store, your audience is within a 5-mile radius, right? Well, that was the case of Harvey Nicks. The 5 miles happened to be Knightsbridge, Sloane Square in Kensington, So I was a Watford working class kid turning up and seeing these people thinking, who has money like that? I had no idea that anyone could live that way. And I think what I did first of all was just try to do what I was doing at Topshop, but it was very difficult. I tried to second guess them because at Topshop I was the customer. Here, I so was not this customer. And it was a culture shock. And so at first, I came in as head of visual display and ended up creative director, which was across every part of the brand essence. So whether that was advertising, design, packaging, windows, events, everything, which was glorious. But when I first came in, I tried to second guess them. And I remember my first Christmas window, I thought, okay, I'll do something that's really sort of grand and fabulous. And at the time, there was this film by Peter Greenaway called The Cook, the Thief and His Lover. It was amazing, rich, crazy, but, quite out there movie. And so I thought, I'll do this. And I remember presenting it to the buying director and saying, this is inspired. This is Baroque period that I'm going to do. And she was so posh. She was French, and she spoke fluent French, and she would drop these French words into her lingo. And she was the think of the Devil Wears Prada. And I remember, she used to close her eyes often when she spoke. And I remember presenting, I was like 28, and I said, I'm going to do this window. And I said, it's a Baroque theme. And she went, no, that's Rococo. And I remember that instant of class coming in. We don't see, that was class, that was you have not been to the lycée, you do not understand the history of art. And that terrible feeling of I don't know what I'm doing here comes upon you, and I don't, everybody thinks you go in and, oh, Mary, you pushed. You don't. We all go through this. And that terrible feeling of I'm in this wrong place. And the only saving bit was when I suddenly, and months later, I went to an exhibition at the Whitechapel. I used to love going to the galleries, just turning up and seeing what was happening across London. I'm very rich. Glasgow's very rich. There's cities of it. And I saw this installation by these crazy dudes in the desert out in Nevada in America, where everybody dumps their used cars and their old cars. And these guys were stacking them and putting them up like Stonehenge, and they called it Carhenge. And they were all standing there with these fags in their mouths and these Carhenge in a desert. And I thought, I'm going to make my windows just this installation. Why do I have to work round the collections? Why don't I just stop people in their tracks? And so I copied it. I nearly got fired, but the thing that saved me was the creative press noticed it, and they wrote about it, the art press. And then Vogue picked it up, my work. And then actually it was the outside world, the opinion makers there, not inside. And so in a way that gave me autonomy to go off and push the boundaries anymore, and it worked. It just ended up working. It was at a time, and I still think that sort of way works today, It was a time where I didn't want to sell stuff, I wanted to make people want to be in a place. And the more I did that, and the more I got excited by it, the more you created a place, like a great, buzzy, vibrant place where you want to be. And that suddenly became the success.
And is that, Mary, what really gave you the confidence? And did people start treating you differently inside when, as you say, Carhenge and the press and the attention that something like that got? Did that make people inside the business
I think they left me alone a bit, because I didn't have to. The thing difference, and I think when you're dealing with numbers, right, there is a logic. There's no two ways about it, right? But there is a risk that you need with finance. And I'm talking because I think it's really important. But when you're dealing with ideas that are slightly tangential, you cannot give a real logical reason why this works. There's a brilliant book by Rick Rubin, who was the same publishers as mine, and it's called The Creative Act. And it's really, he's in the music. And it's the same with music or art. You don't have great artists going out and saying, right, can you tell me what you'd like? Or doing a bit of customer research. It doesn't happen, right? But funnily enough, so that they instinctively create. They don't want, or musicians, they don't go out and find out what, they instinctively create. There's either a talent there or not. And then they surround themselves by the right people to get that out into the world, And that in itself is another great, a great skill. Who are the people who are going to partner me in this idea? And I think what happened in business too much, particularly when the internet came in and omni-channel happened, particularly in my area, the business of retail, operationally overtook the creative risk and the idea. And now that we're coming out of this heightened consumerist society, which we are, and the reason it's called I Shop, Therefore I Am is not like, woohoo, let's all go out and get shopping. The reason I called the book this was when I was at Harvey Nichols, the artist Barbara Kruger did this incredible exhibition at the Serpentine, and she put up these statements through art around London, around cities in the world, that really defined how crap we were becoming as a society. And I Shop Therefore I Am was an indictment on the fact that we, in the 90s and the noughties, were defining ourselves by what we owned. And it was a terrible time, but we didn't realise it. We didn't realise, well, I didn't realise it. It was this wonderful parable that David Foster Wallace did when he did an opening speech at LA University, and I loved it. And he said, two little fish were swimming through water, and a big fish comes along and says, "Morning, boys, how's the water?" and the little fish swim on, and then one says to the other, what's water? That's a really good metaphor, you know. There we were creating this stuff. You know, there was a time when, you know, I remember sitting with Tom Ford at Gucci, and he had designed this handbag, and we wanted to launch it at Harvey Nicks. We're talking about a handbag at the time that was like £800, you know. And you knew that the equity of brand was so powerful that you could take a product that was probably made, not at Gucci, please don't refer to it as, but, you know, I know for a fact that Armani suits were made in the same factories where Marks and Spencer's had their suits made. But the equity that was in brand and brand profile meant that you could go, well, that's 5 times the amount, that's 6 times the amount. And I remember so vividly walking through the accounts department, believe it or not, I did go there regularly. And I'll tell you a story about the accountant who actually taught me how to manage budgets, which was actually really one of the most important things that happened in my career. But I used to go and see him, and I loved it, you know, just to see how much I could push the budget and what I could do and where I'd take the risk. And I think he enjoyed it, you know. We used to have. But I remember walking back through the department and seeing one of the young account assistants, and I thought she'd had a baby because she was cooing at this chair next to her, and it was the Gucci handbag. and I thought, wow, oh my God, people want this so much. This is great what I'm doing. Not thinking, no. You know, that girl's, that's month's wages that's been spent on that. So I was that little fish. But when you aren't the little fish and you realise, which we are talking about, you know, responsibility and becoming businesses that actually have a conscience, once you're on that path, it's very difficult to come off it. And it's how do you keep on that path and make thriving, profitable businesses. Mm-hmm. And I always, you know, when I started, I wrote a book called Work Like a Woman and Rebuild How to Thrive in a New Kindness Economy. I got thrown in at the deep end on many talks to like bankers and JP Morgan and people like that. And all of them want to know, how do we do that? Tell us that we can make that same amount of profit. They're scared to take that leap on, how do I do this? How do I create a business where trust, responsibility, ethics are at the heart of it? Mm-hmm. And every time I throw out, I said, if you were doing a beauty business today, you'd start the Body Shop again. Look what she did. Mm-hmm. Everything, do no harm. She was this kind of radical punk spiritualist, you know, who just wasn't sitting meekly in the corner. She had a vision of what she believed beauty should be about and how it should be for women. And she had a vision of how we should be treating suppliers. And she sold that to the world with just magnetism at the heart of it. She was one of my greatest heroes ever. She told me off terribly once when I fucked up royally, sorry. I put in this windows of Barbies and at Harvey Nichols, and I covered the windows with Barbies, and then all these feminists were outside going mad, saying this doesn't represent women's bodies, and I had to rip them all out, even though we'd hammered, I think, about 1,000 Barbies with little nails through their feet to the floor. And we sent all these little nailed holes Barbies down to Great Ormond Street. And so there's all these little kids. And it was so sweet. I called them all into the store and we gave them hot chocolate and toys, and they were just absolutely loving it. But the window was a failure. And Anita Roddick rang me up and said, shame on you putting women like that in the windows, Mary. And she put in this big blow-up doll that was called Ruby, which showed women's real size. And I'd shown these little Barbies in the windows. Anyway.
But again, it was another idea.
It's a
risk.
risk.
It was a risk, and you've taken.
I got headlines.
Your whole career,
headlines.
Yeah. And so, do you obviously see creativity, Mary, as something? It's not this add-on that businesses should think of last. Do you see it as something that genuinely can completely transform a business and is?
Every business starts with an idea.
Yeah.
Every business starts with an idea, and you know, as I said, that creativity isn't the hipster who comes in his old Levi's and his, you know, Red Wing boots. Creativity comes from ideas and then how you harness and create that and pull it together and who are the right people around. I mean, that to me is great creativity. It's not just, you know, I mean, of course you have extraordinary artists that pure creativity, but it doesn't work unless they're discovered. Someone promotes them, someone keeps them within budget, I mean, look at the greatest artists who have left this planet, have never made a penny, you know? It's not who's made the money afterwards on the back of them, you know? The people who understand how to market and how to promote and how how to manage finances. I don't see it as alienating. It's a harmonious thing, and when it's in rhythm and you all work together, it's magical. Harvey Nichols, it was a real team effort. You know, I would be doing this crazy stuff. You had a really focused buying director who knew exactly, great sales director who knew every square foot, and a great finance director. That was the four of us together. You know, and I only mentioned the one financial consultant who was a bit of a dick, who used to sort of try and minimise me. But the guy who worked with me before, because he was extraordinary, and I used to think if I saved my money on my budget, I was doing well. He said, no, you've got to spend it because they're going to limit it next time, Mary. And I was like, oh my God, this is amazing. This guy's on my side. And it was just brilliant how we worked together. And he taught me how to work with budgets and where to mow my spend, everything. I just adored him. And he moved on, and they brought in this consultant who was the dick. And I thought my time was up when I remember once, and he said, my wife didn't like your last set of windows. And I just thought, I've seen your wife. Now, why am I worried about this, you know? But nevertheless, and it becomes you've got to sign off across everything, you know. And here's the thing, I am going to say it to all you finance people, because I do write about it, as I've never had, or the finance teams, everybody has the same. When you're doing a campaign, or when I was doing an idea to launch London Fashion Week, young designers, or whatever, I would present to the board, and everyone had an opinion. Never did the numbers guys present to me and say, is this all right, Mary? Can I run these past you? Just want to put that one out there. No one ever said, do you think this is the right... I'm joking. I would have been terrible.
It's a very good point. Just you say in the book, and I heard you talking about this in a couple of podcasts, the fact that you had your two children, and the direction that Harvey Nicks was going in, and the beast that had become, and you'd been part of this machine. What was it that made you then decide, I can't do this anymore, I need to go off in my own direction? Was it dealing with comments like that from...
Okay, it's a mix of everything. That would be far too binary if I said it was that, but I think what happened was, when we first were a loss-making business, so you go, I'm going to try this, I'm going to try this, I'm going to do this, I'm going to try this, and you create something quite magical. And then what often happens in business is the rear view mirror comes in. What did we take last year? Okay, let's add 20%. We're going to go for that. And actually, there's no particular logic around that. So the control systems go in. And it really then becomes, it's a bit like the pirates go out on the ship. Hello, come in, pirates. The pirates go out on the ship, you know, and then the caretakers get on board. And when the caretakers take over the pirates, you've got a real worry. And it's how you get that blend together. I just thought I'd done it, and I'd done an incredible 10 years. I'd had these two kids. I kept on getting offered these other jobs in New York or other sorts. And I remember thinking, I don't want to go and work for anyone else, but I wouldn't mind doing something with your business. And so I then set up my consultancy. And that was a really, really scary, difficult time. You know, it's actually how I got my moniker, Mary Queen of Shops. It wasn't through TV. The Times wrote, when I left, Harvey Nichols, Mary Queen of Shops has left, and did this whole piece. And that's how I got that name. So I don't know, I think life, you know when to move on, or sometimes I think when we don't do that, whether that's in anything in life, you know, not just careers, relationships, whatever, you just instinctively know I'm not being as great as I was before, and I'm not loving this, and I'm not getting quite as excited, and that's not fair on the business as well, you know, and I became a bit cynical, and you know, all of that, and it didn't, you know, give me joy anymore. And so I just thought that's not fair on this as well. And so I set up my own business and went, which was, you know, the right thing to do.
We need to mention, because I'm conscious there's so much, we could have a week and still not get through every single story that Mary could give us. Absolutely fabulous. We need to mention that. Did you honestly have no idea how Harvey Nicks was going to be portrayed, and how did you actually meet Jennifer Saunders? How did it all come about in the first place?
Well, I was doing a photo shoot, and it was the Best of British, and there was Jasper Conran, Betty Jackson, John Roche, I can't remember who else. And Betty Jackson used to dress Jennifer Saunders. She was always, she was on the phone to her while we were doing this shoot. I remember it. We were all having sort of lunch, and all the designers were there and the models, and Betty was really laughing, and she was telling everyone that Jennifer's doing this comedy, and it's based on Lynn Franks. Now, Lynn Franks was the big publicist of the time, and it's all going to be set around the fashion industry, and everyone's going, oh my God, this is going to be hilarious. What will it be like? And I just said to her, do you think what do you think she's going to be looking for where she's going to film stores, you know? And Betty, go on, give me a number, and I'll see if she'll film in Harvey Nichols. So Betty said, okay, I'll bring her in. And so Jennifer came in, and she was so laconic. She never gave me a thing, like nothing. I was expecting, oh, this will be a laugh. No. And she was very laconic. Actually, it was really funny. I was interviewed in, I can't remember what festival, I can't remember, Hay. And the interviewer, who was one of the writers for the Times, said she just interviewed Jennifer and said, by the way, Mary wrote in your book that you were really scary. And she said, and she felt it too. And Jennifer said, no, I'm not. Everyone thinks I've got that really awful sort of face, which can look, I think she's quite shy. But anyway, so she comes in, and I said, she wouldn't tell me what it was about because, you know, they were starting filming. And I said, look, and I remember just thinking, God, how do I end this meeting? Because there's not a lot being given here. And I said, Jennifer, look, if you want to film, we are the store that is on everybody's lips. We weren't quite by then, but I said, everybody, Betty, isn't that true? Betty's going, nodding. Betty obviously wanted to nod because she was one of our designers and she wanted to keep us happy as well. So, and she said, yeah. And I said, come in, anytime you want to film, day, night, it's here. Please just mention Harvey Nicks. She went, oh, I'll let you know. Went away, didn't think anything. I was like, oh, gosh. 2 weeks later, she calls me and she said, okay, I'm coming in to film. Is it all right? I have the store. That's it. I said, yeah. That was about it. I said, well, I was coming on this day. And I said, okay, yeah. And it was night time. And all my team were like, we want to work in the window, stay behind. You know, it's hilarious. And I used to love at the end of the day, you know, and being in a store, it's magical, you know. The store's closed, it's fantastic. It's, you know, I love it. It's to work in my office and you have the lamp on in the evening. And I could see all the cameras were setting up downstairs. And I hadn't told, by the way, the MD this was happening. I hadn't told, I hadn't said anything. And I thought, well, I'll just pop down and have a look what's happening. And now Joanna Lumley at the time, Joanna Lumley was this very glamorous actress who used to be Purdy in The Avengers, and she'd never done comedy. And she did say to me, it's going to be me and Joanna Lumley, me and Joanna are going to be filming. I said, okay. So I thought, oh, it's going to be so glamorous. I go downstairs. I go down, and they're out on Sloane Street, and we've got this corner Sloane Street door where they're coming in. Lumley has got a bottle of champagne and a fag on in and out, and her hair all like someone's pulled her through the back end of a bush, and I can't even tell you what Jennifer looked like. A hat. I said, come on, darling, I'm going into Harvey Nicks. And I was like, oh my God, this is just, I am going to be sacked. When this comes out, we are going to be sent up, you know. And it was, I don't think I slept for 3 months. And then it did come out, and it was so brilliant. And of course, she used all the designers. It's Lacroix Love, so Lacroix was in it, and we were the only store. And it suddenly went from a store that was known to a store that was global.
Yeah.
And everyone just, overnight, you know, we would have these young kids coming into the beauty department, age groups that we didn't have before, hanging out in the MAC department. And it just took us, so everything that we've been doing, it just built, and it just went to another league. And it was just, you know, extraordinary and wonderful in equal measure. Yeah.
Another example, though, imagine you'd actually asked the MD and they'd said no. So that was another example of taking a risk and then not sleeping for 3 months, but then it completely pays off.
It was really worth that lack of sleep.
Yeah. But it did, really, because you know, went from Harvey's to Harvey Nicks, and she's called
it Harvey Nicks. It was everyone used to call it Harvey's, the poshers. Yeah. And then she said it's going to Harvey Nicks, and it became Harvey Nicks, darling. And it just took to another league, and it was brilliant, and it was wonderful, and it was joyous. And you know, I mean, sometimes that's when I went out for that dinner with the team. Do we do this? You know, and it was hilarious. So yeah, it was kind of like Mr. Selfridge on acid, our days, you know, the 90s there. I mean, some stories I just couldn't even repeat, quite frankly.
There's another book in there somewhere. Queen of Shops. I mean, it was watched by millions of people. Mary, how did you handle then becoming this public figure who was then recognisable and people would spot on the street, because you'd gone from your business, your industry had all been behind the scenes and behind these incredible windows. So how did you then handle the fame element, I suppose, that came later?
Oh, it's a really lovely thing, and I think, you know, the British public is just fantastic. You know, I remember the first time this guy saying, "Hello, Mary, how are you?" And I was thinking, I haven't got a clue who you were. But he'd seen me, and it was the moment that I remember thinking, how do I navigate this? And I just realised that then you just get that a lot. And it's just lovely. Most people are really, really good and generous and fun. And so, you know, there's been times where I was in a cafe and someone just came and sat with me and just said, "Oh," and then ate her lunch, and and sat the whole time. And said, "Oh, thank you for having lunch with me." I thought, I did not ask. And so that was a bit, but mainly people are just great. I mean, I have 3 children. My eldest son loved it, and so people go, "Come a picture," and he'd be like, "I'll take it." And my daughter used to just go like this and just hide. So I had to manage that, you know, that you've got to just be careful who you bring with that, you know, especially when you're written about in the press, and, you know, it's just, but generally it's a very lovely thing.
Just in terms of some kind of up-to-date news, we've had some latest figures showing that the retail growth in January, retail sales in UK-wide have gone up 1.8%. Scotland's a slightly better picture, 3.3% throughout January. Obviously, there's a lot of, you know, boosts from January sales and the likes. When you're thinking about the retail space in the UK now, do you think we are seeing green shoots, or is it still a really tough environment for businesses in the UK at the moment in the shape of the economy?
I think everything's tough at the moment. I've never known business so tough. Never known business so tough. I think even after COVID, I think it was easier. I think, you know, to 2008 financial, it was easier. I just think there's this real, I think it's global politics that is just a real malaise and an anger, and I think it's a really tough time. I think financially, I think we've got this terrible polarisation of people who should know better, who have made huge amounts of money and are doing nothing for society. Don't get me on it. I'm just in love with Robert De Niro at the moment. Is anyone following what De Niro says when he talks about Trump? He's a punk, he's a git. I love him. You are my kind of man. And he talks about hope and fabulousness, and I think there's a levelling out. There's lots of things happening. Culturally, you've got to understand so we've got this terrible, I think people really feel it in their hearts, you know. And I think we've realised as well that we've just spent too much on stuff we don't need. So you're seeing a real shift, move away from. I mean, you only have to look at the fashion press 4 years ago, 5 years ago. Get the look, you know. This is the handbag of the season. I used to go to shows. If you did not have that new outfit or the new handbag when you were sitting in the front row at Paris or Milan, you were like yesterday's chip paper. No one would do that today. It's vulgar, it's gauche, right? So there's a cultural move away from how much do we need. We're seeing the rise in second-hand fashion growing faster than fast fashion. And it's come from a low base, but that's a really lovely green shoot. What I think is going to happen, I think post-COVID, I was very disappointed in the budget of Rachel Reeves on small businesses, and I've certainly sent her a note on that, because I think they got hammered. You know, the rise in national insurance rates and the basic pay. And she talks about those with the wide shoulder. Do it to the big boys who pass it on in costs, not to the little. And I think we're a country of entrepreneurs, innovators, creatives, extraordinary. And so many people want to get out there and own their own business. Give them a bloody chance here, you know, that's what I think. But I think there's a couple of good signs that are coming our way, and I think it's this. I think, and this is a kind of cultural macro thing, I don't think change is going to come from global politics or even so much our own politicians. I think change is going to come from communities and people. And I think we've seen a power where people have started to, and I'm seeing it across the country, take responsibility for their own place. And in some ways, and regeneration of places and spaces, one of the good things that Labour's done is Pride in Place, where you're now able to, community ownership has first priority on taking over empty shops that have been empty for 365 days. Because you had these greedy landlords, when I did my high street report, you could do nothing about. If they're an Icelandic bank that happens to own that shop, they don't give a hoot that that's pulling down the energy of, you know, one of the streets in Glasgow, they don't care, they're not there. So I think the energy and power is going to come from collective hyper-localism, and I think we're going to see much more of that at play, and local councils connecting much more with the local people to say, how can we make change happen? And I think the other thing that we're seeing is that post-COVID, we realised how much just being inside or being online actually pulls our little hearts down, and we were desperate and neurobiologically wired to connect. So all of those cultural things, you know, Mother Earth and our respect for it, how much we buy, this is all post-consumerism. And so we're going into this new phase. I just wish that we had, and you know, look, I don't think Labour is as bad as they're being portrayed, because like but I just wish we had some policies that were in place that just said, we are going to really, in the way that Ed Miliband is doing for Green. I think he's the only one that's actually making progress, and possibly, what's his name, on the National Health Service. I think that's where I would be putting some more energy, and I think they're failing us a little bit on that.
Just before we open the floor to some questions, it's obviously the International Women's Day annual event that we're here with ICAS for, Mary. When you look back at your own career and as a leader in a business sense, what's been the one bit of advice, I suppose, or something that you've learned that you've really held on to as a female leader?
God, I don't know. There's lots. I've written a book on it. It was called Work Like a Woman. I mean, it's appalling. How many years, and you're the first?
172.
Yeah.
Which Rachel Reeves, 180 years first female chance. It's shocking, isn't it, that we're actually going, ooh, at this today. What's the first thing? Do you know what it probably is? I think, and I talk about it on a much bigger scale than this, I think that at the time that I wrote Work Like a Woman, Sheryl Sandberg was writing Lean In. And she's made a lot more dosh than I've ever made. And I remember my daughter was at Oxford at the time. I'm showing off because I came from literally nothing, and I kind of go girl. But she was at Oxford, and she'd be careful, Mum, that title. You're going to alienate a lot of people. And I went, no, I've got to go out there and talk about women and the energy of women and the suppression that we've had of feminine values. In men as well. I think there's a man over there. I hear you laughing. Thank you. Not at me. Not at me. And I think what I would have done more is really respected my intuition and my feminine energy, and not lent into a patriarchal alpha culture which has been set up by men over millennia. Across everything, across, you know, church, every position in society was set up with a patriarchal alpha culture, and we had to lean into that in order to succeed. I mean, you only have to go back to the 90s and noughties. I mean, one of the things, please edit this out, but one of the things when they look up speakers and they put people like me and they put Karen Brady in there, and I go, please don't do that. Because she's one of those that's gone into a man's world and behaved, and she's a really successful woman. But I don't want to be that. I want to be a woman who can be vulnerable, who's in touch with the sensitivity part of her life. And I think that's deeply important. And I love men around me. It's the same thing. And this is going to go slightly off-piste here, but I think that, you know, when you read some of the ancient traditions that have talk about we've suppressed the divine feminine in society. It's been suppressed over millennial, and that's why we're seeing such anger in the world, because the bird of humanity just is flying on one wing, and it just gets tougher and tougher and goes around in circles making the same mistakes, because all the women who have been suppressed and the divine feminine over centuries, who were, you know, I'm going off on a tangent, but bear with me, it's true. But that has to come back up to make equality. And it's not falling into that energy, it's creating our own energy. And I think I would have stood up more on that. That wasn't one answer, was it? But anyway, thank you.
No, it's what a fantastic message to end this part of the discussion on, because I want to bring you all in. You've been very generous and come along and given us your time this evening. So I want to open the floor. We do have a couple of microphones, and for anyone watching online, I do have the ability to get your questions up here as well. So I don't know if we can put the lights up a little bit, or if we're going to keep them like this, but we do have some microphones that will pass round. Yes. Does anyone want to kick us off and ask Mary a question on anything you've just heard, anything from the book you've maybe read? Oh, we've got a couple here.
Hi, and thanks very much for that. Really enjoyed it. With it being International Women's Day next week, what woman has inspired you most, or women in multiple, in your life?
Well, in terms of the messages, and I just, every time I used to hear a speak, I think, how do you know so much about the world, would be Maya Angelou. I think someone who went through such a pain body and created such wisdom and beauty, and never angry, never bitter, just this joyous intellect that I just found incredible. I loved Anita Roddick. I think she sort of walked, she was that, as I said, that energy that was just extraordinary. I have to say, the more that I'm listening to Hillary Clinton, the more I think, whoa, you know, she would have been a great leader instead of that ginger orange man that we have. You know, and I think there's a brilliant book, I don't know if anyone's read it, called Oldham. It was written by this very American writer who I love. And she's written it as if Hillary Clinton became president, which she could have done when her and Bill got together. And it's a really, and you see what she was like. I mean, how the press reflect her and so forth. It's a really interesting book to read if you get a chance to read it. And my mother. My mother had 5 kids, and she was the backbone. And when she died when I was 16, I thought my father had all the strength. And you just realised what a matriarch does, you know, and that ability to do so many things. Women can do so many things. Sorry to that one man over there. They can. I employ lots of women.
Yes, can spin many plates and multitask. Any more questions?
Fire away.
I've really enjoyed the 90s nostalgia. What businesses today do you think have got that sort of energy and magic?
Oh, that's a really interesting question. Well, I'll look at ones that I thought that were very sort of broke through. Exactly today. I think in the early days when Julian Metcalf did Pret-a-Manger, I thought that was absolutely genius. You know, he took what was, you know, the humdrum sandwich shop and just filled it with, you know, just energy. You know, I remember, and I loved it. I became quietly obsessed, and whenever I was filming, I always wanted to Pret coffee. I had to find a Pret. And I'll tell you why I loved it. You went in, and there was just this great kind of world music. You felt like you were in the middle of New York, you know, when you went in there. Always fresh food going out onto the shelves. You never saw the staff chatting with each other. It was like a sort of Dublin bar, you know, next. And he was a real genius. I mean, they've lost a lot of that now, but it was a real breakthrough and really redoing what was a very old... I remember I was filming with this fast fashion shop, which was, oh God, it was a terrible fashion shop. It was doing Mary Queen of Shops, and the girls in it were so, you could tell they just did not want to be on this fashion floor. You could tell the guy at the top who owned it, who saw himself as some silver fox, was trying to get as fast, quick, how cheap can I get stuff out to the customers? And these girls, they used to be leaning on the fitting room like that, and as the customer came in, they'd say, 3 outfits only. And I'd say, why are you letting them only having 3 outfits? Because they steal. I said, well, that's a nice premise, isn't it, first of all, that you think everyone, these young girls come, I mean, it was a comedy, Mary Queen of Shops, I have to add most of the time, that they come in here, what about if you make this fun and exciting for them? And I thought, do you know what, I'm going to get them to stand behind a fast fashion food business and feel the energy, and they won't have this body language, they'll have a vision. And I got the producers to ring Julian Metcalf, see if we could come in, and he said no. So I rang him, I said, why will you not let me film? You know I always talk about your business and how good it is. And he said, because I don't want people to know my strategy for training people, because there isn't one, there's only one rule. And he said, now look a knob. And I said, what's your one rule? He said, I only employ happy people. Because you can teach a happy person to make a coffee, but you can't teach someone who's got a face like a slapped ass to say, morning. You just can't. It's so true, right?
It's so true.
And I thought that was one of the best things, you know. And what he used to do, I've gone on, it's like, what he used to do is when he was bringing in a new member, and they say, oh, right, you know, Carly's coming and she's come for an interview, He wouldn't do them. He'd sit them in. He'd just, come and meet the team and have lunch with them. And they'd all chat. It'd all be the team who were on the floor. And they'd soon hear whether Carly was moaning about this at home or whatever her last job. And they would make the decision on who came in. Isn't that great?
Yeah,
Isn't that great?
very good.
That's innovation.
Yeah.
That's innovation.
Any other quick? Was there another hand up the back, or did we get? Yep, just along here.
Thank you very much. I wonder if I were to give you a magic wand and you had one spell that you could cast over retail in the UK, what would you do?
Oh, I thought you were saying over politics. I know who I'd kill.
You can answer. You can answer both. You can answer both, Mary.
All those angry men
Retail
that
and
are
politics.
making... Oh, yeah. So we start off with the gun and then it becomes a wand, all right? Should we do that?
Yeah.
I tell you what I would have done, and they're doing it, is Gap. I was so sad when Gap went because Gap was so universally wonderful. And I think they're doing a very good job on bringing that back. I think I would wave a magic wand, and this is what I do, close down retail parks and out of town shopping. I met with the chief exec of Marks and Spencer's the other day, and he just said to me, and I said, come on, look at you, you're nailing it. It's really happening at the moment. It's great, and I went into the Pantheon store on Oxford Street. I said, but what about all those tertiary towns that have been left behind? Amazing if you did pop-ups. You just turned up with this great collection. My sister lives in Poole. She's always moaning that there's nothing there. And he said, oh, no, Mary. He said, I've noticed that really where the money is in the retail parks. And I just went, can I leave the meeting now? It was like, tell me anyone. Philip Larkin once wrote that if he died, he'd like to die in Sloane Street's Peter Jones fabric department. I don't think anyone would say they'd like to be found dead on a retail park. Would you? So you know what I mean? Where would you want to be? You'd want to be somewhere that's joyous, has energy, that feels that you just want to spend the day in. And I just thought that was terrible. So I would take the magic wand and I would... So after shooting, I'm now bombing with the magic wand.
Bombing retail parks.
Retail parks and out-of-town shopping. That's what I do. We've got enough sites for us to all be together and connect and do wonderful stuff.
Any other? Oh, yep. Couple more. I think we'll go.
There's nothing on finance from all your team, is it? It's hilarious.
Is there any retailer that you haven't worked with that you wanted to work with, or is there any retailer you've worked with that you didn't want to work with?
Oh, stop that, as if I'm going to tell that. I have walked out of... No, I don't do that now, thank God. We don't, because we pick retailers that want to go on that journey of, let's make this a better world. Let's do something that actually gives back to society and makes profit. So that eliminates the plenty of businesses that don't do that. It's interesting, when everyone asks me, the ones that I love to get hold of are not luxury or the fashion ones. I always wanted to get hold of, home base and go, please, could we not do this better? Please, can we not do this better? And it's got to do with the joy you can make. Who could get home wrong? I mean, home is about creating a place that just feels warm, fuzzy, and I want to be in it. And yet they did. So badly, So I wanted to always get a hold of them. I remember going in one Christmas with my brother to get some Christmas lights, and there was just nobody, and they just all looked very sad, the people who were there. And the music was that worst kind of music, bashing in the background. And we so needed these Christmas lights, so I just took them off one of the Christmas trees that was on display and went out and just went up to them and said, could you just pay for those? Nobody even noticed. Nobody even noticed. The one manky little display tree. And I thought, this could be incredible, The same with B&Q. Let's make this joyous. We're building, that's the ones that I think could be extraordinary. That's where we'll spend money. We'll spend on our home. We spend on well-being. We spend on food. Why don't we make this fantastic? I did a talk to garden centres I can't remember, ages ago. And there's one of my very first book launch. I did it in a garden centre. This woman wrote to me, and she's very canny, because a lot of people live in North London where I live who are great writers and artists. And she opened up this cafe in a garden centre, super cool. She had put antiques in it, art, And she just asked, I think it was, who wrote, I'll think of his name. Anyway, Caledonian Road, who lives near me. And she asked him to go in and do the first book launch, and he did it. Who? You said it. Yes, well done. We'll get Hagen, yes. He's around the corner. So Andrew went in and did it. And then she asked me, and it was just the most glorious place. You walked through this garden centre, you went up into the cafe, and I thought, garden centres, everybody will spend time in those. And yet, if you go into B&Q's garden centre, you just think, how quickly can I get out? I think that, and they'll spend on massive ad campaigns, and massive. Come to, and then you go and you go, I don't get it. Advertising was the last thing I did at Harvey Nichols, and it's always the last thing I do with any brand. So how do we get this magnetised and wonderful, and just places, whether it's digital, physical, how do you do that? And then you tell, and bring them in. Everyone goes, wow. How often do you get that? How often do you get that feeling?
Yep, I think we had 2 more. Time for 2 more.
Hi, you mentioned collective hyperlocalism earlier on about.
Did I say all those words? Collective hyper. I am right. Okay.
I just was interested more in kind of what you meant exactly by that, and how you see the change happening. Like, I'm very privileged to work with a lot of very small businesses in the mile around my house, and so that kind of spoke out to me, so I just was interested in what you actually meant about it.
Well, I think if you look historically at how we work, particularly in the retail sector, you had the landlord, it was individual. It was siloed, right? And we've realised that, and we're starting to see new business models that are coming that are actually more based around community. So, for example, there's lots of layers to this. It's going to be a very long one, sorry. I won't make it long, but so I'm going to go for a cultural thing first of all. We can impact as people our own areas. That's where we can have impact. Whether that's even a physical good morning or a smile at people or popping into our local cafe or choosing to do that, we can have impact. We cannot have impact on global politics, and that really affects us. And I think people are starting to, because of that, pull together and create community. We'll open up the library again, and it's all sourced by people who live in the community. I work with the Plunkett Foundation, which takes rural shops which were left when the digital world came, and it wasn't worth the big brands having a little supermarket out there, because it's just too much for them to be driving out and delivering. It's not cost effective. Close them all down. And so now community right to buy is done by Plunkett, and I help with them. And when you guide these businesses, they have, all of them, a 98% success rate, because everybody who puts into that community is invested, because they want their kids to feel safe. They want to be able to have a place that's a stop, you can stop off, and is localised. We're seeing it even through, which is wonderful. I don't know if any of you have seen that on that choir. Has anybody seen that, where they are getting groups together of people that just sing in communities, and then they get really famous singers who just come, and so they'll learn a Patti Smith song, People Have the Power, and then Patti turns up and does the thing, and everybody sings the chorus. And we're seeing this happening across the world, where it's going, I can't trust you. And then we're seeing new types of businesses happening. So one that I'm loving particularly is in Stroud, where this guy who owned, I filmed with him years ago, Hobbs House Bakery, and he's opened up this business called The Long Table. And the basis of it was that most people can't afford to eat out, right? Because it's so damn expensive. So he has this pay it forward business model, and he started off with just getting people who said, we'll do it, we'll help out, you know, parents who were at home with kids, you know, cooking, bringing in stuff that they had that was left in their fridge. And you'd go in and you'd say, what's on the menu? And they'd say, oh, it's a rice walla pilau. How much is it? £10. Do you want to pay it forward? I'll pay 15. And then someone comes in who can only afford £3, and they pay £3, someone nothing. And there's this long table, and you all sit together, and you don't know who's paid, who hasn't, or whatever. It's become so successful that now he's taken over House of Fraser stores, where they went, which just like, you know, the managing director still trying to just sell loads of stuff and hadn't got the memo that the world is changing. And he's put in recycled kids' clothes. And so they have a whole recycled area of that. kids' bikes that get handed in, because, I mean, how many bikes should just get wasted? So there's all there, and they've got the guys who come in and do repairs. It's massive, and he's now opening up a third site in Bristol, and it's all community focused. Everybody's now paid, but it's these new ideas that require creativity and people coming together and going, should we make this happen? That's what I mean by that. And we will see less. I mean, I don't know what paper it was that I did an interview with before, but he was saying, oh, you know, I can see lots of clothes shops closed down. We're going to see less retail, but we might see great second-hand clothes being put in. The hairdresser might go, I'll put that in the corner there for you. And that's what we're seeing, spaces being collaborative together, which we hadn't seen before. And it's a really exciting time, and new models coming out of that. I've done a lot of research on it, and in the States they've done it in Detroit, which was down on its knees, and they've taken places which were just left empty and created community libraries where they've put music into it, and all the kids come in, where most bands start in youth clubs, and they're now putting in, and all the big music businesses are donating. You've just got to go and have the ideas and go to the people with it. And I'm working on Croydon Westfield site. Now, I did the Westfield site in White City, worked with them in 2008, and like we know, we're over and past this high consumerism, and we're now going, what's the new anchor points we want to put in Croydon? You can't land, you know, Westfield and just say it's all about lovely shopping. So the first things we're starting with are youth clubs, skateboarding site, which is where the car park used to be, you know, and actually giving real anchors for the young who can hang out, and then the retail and are partnering. And so we're going to people like JD Sports. Will you sponsor the skate park? Will you open up the netball courts in there and basketball courts? So I think we're seeing a much more collaborative way of approaching, because we realise that we've let something very important go. High streets, to me, was never about what we sold. It was a social infrastructure of connection and a web of security, and actually how most of us want to live.
I think there was one person down here, I think just in front of you. Yep, you had your hand up a couple of times.
I think your response to this previous question may make this question redundant. However, I wonder if you have any optimistic feelings about the future of the department store. And I think in Glasgow, particularly where we are right now, there was a tradition of these extraordinary Victorian buildings being inhabited by grand department stores where people came, and it was a ritualistic kind of visitation. And that's probably not the wrong word. But I wonder if you have any optimistic feelings about how creativity can entice more people to believe in the department store. Is there a future?
Of course there is, but it's not the department store you've seen in the past. And even if you go back in the history of department stores, if you go back into the history of the high streets, it all moved on when culturally we moved on. You know, let's go right back to when they're the gin swinging bars. You know, it all moves with what our needs are based. Go to Paris has been one of the what happened with our department stores? I'm sorry, but sometimes, again, it's that heightened consumerism time where you didn't have visionaries who go, this is changing. I can see that culture's changing, and kept on filling up these places with stuff. There's Bon Marché, if you get a chance to go to in Paris, it's extraordinary what they've done with it. It's utterly beautiful. They've gone, okay, they culturally shift according to what's happening. The other day they were doing this whole week of bring your dog in. So they've opened up the grooming salon, and you can have dogs having their lunches in there and sitting having coffees. In Melbourne they've started putting a farm on the roof of one of the department stores. You can have workspace, put in workout spaces. The department store, I believe, should be this wonderful place where everything we need across every social part should be in there, not just stuff. And then within that, of course, you have gorgeous pieces of stuff that you want to buy. And I don't think department stores is dead. I think lack of imagination is is the problem in so many.
Hard agree.
Yeah.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, what a way to leave it. As I say, I think we could sit and listen to Mary all night, but unfortunately that is us. We've ran out of time in terms of questions. Can I please put our hands together? Fantastic. Mary Portas. Thank you. And just before we finish up, we are going to leave the final word with ICAS President Karen Scholes.
Thank you so much, Mary and Amy. This has been such a fun and interesting chat with so much food for thought. I think, Mary, what you've said about, you know, business and business giving back to the community, business working in the community, but business is also making profit really resonates with me, because business has to make profit. That's what we're there for. But if we can do that right, if we can do that in the community and give back, what a different place this would be. So I think that's really, that's how we want to work. And I think that's how everyone wants to work in the future. I hope that Mary has been an inspiration and an encouragement to everyone here tonight and everyone who will watch this. She's a prime example that we can do anything and do it very well if we believe in ourselves and work hard. I'm the 6th woman president in ICAS's 172-year history. And whilst I was extremely proud to have been appointed to the role, I must admit I was also nervous. I had a touch of imposter syndrome. That self-doubt is surprisingly common amongst women in the accountancy profession, and no doubt in all professions. It's often not just the glass ceiling that can hold us back. We can often be limited by our own unwarranted lack of confidence. After this evening, I'd like you to connect with as many inspiring women, and I would like you all to consider joining our recently launched CA Women's Network. The network is a community of fellow ICAS members and students. It is an open and safe and supportive space where you might go for inspiration, to discuss challenges, or share professional perspectives. Perhaps you have imposter syndrome and are looking for a mentor who can share their experience and offer some encouragement to help you take the next step. The network is also a platform to help amplify CA women's voices, to raise common issues and address the challenges faced by women in the profession. And because it's entirely member-led, the network is whatever we will make it. If you'd like to consider joining or want to find out more, please just search Women's Network at ICAS.com. Or you can speak to Ashley from the ICAS team, who is here with us in Glasgow this evening. Before I go, I also wanted to quickly mention the independent research study we published at the end of last year on the 3 M's of menstruation, menopause and miscarriage, and the impacts they have on women's careers. It was the first time an accountancy body had produced a report on the 3 M's. Its findings were relevant to every sector and industry that employs women. The study revealed that there's often a culture of stigma and silence around these topics. It highlighted the importance of leadership and the role models. And it showed some of the ways in which employers can help to improve the working lives of women. If you've not read the report, I'd encourage you to check it out at icas.com. You'll also find a great feature of it in the January edition of the CA magazine. And in the current CA magazine, you'll find an interview with Mary, which is absolutely worth reading. Based on the study's findings, ICAS has already begun to offer targeted support and to create spaces, such as the CA Women's Network, for open discussions around the 3 M's themes. We'll also be running webinars and events focused on women's health and career experiences. So please keep an eye out on your ICAS emails and social media to find out how you can also get involved. I'd like to finish with a final thanks to Mary for your entertainment and inspiration, and also for saying that every business does need that good accountancy team with that eye on the budget. I think we're all very good at keeping these creative people within budget. And to Amy for a wonderful job of hosting this evening. Thank you all for joining us. If you're in this room, hopefully people online will be able, if they've not watched it already, to watch it later. I'd like you all now to join us outside, and we'll chat to as many of you as we can. Thank you for coming.